Now I'm going to talk about the recipe that we use for driving the knowledge and confidence amongst frontline staff so that they offer that great member experience. So the first thing that we, as I mentioned, Launchfire is a game-based digital promotions company. So game-based engagement is kind of, it's in our DNA. And we use that for the foundational knowledge aspect of digital training. So, you know, what are the limits on remote check deposit or bill pay or whatever? There's limits, policies, procedures around digital that have to be taught. And that's not typically the most engaging information. So that's where game-based learning can be really effective, and for a bunch of reasons. First of all, game-based learning is inherently bite-sized. So instead of bombarding people with a whole bunch of foundational information and expecting them to retain it and be able to regurgitate it to customers, we break it into small bite-sized learning that people can take, you know, within the flow of work or when they got a little break at work. The other thing about game-based learning is, unlike most teaching in life, it embraces mistakes. You know, when you were in school, every time you made a mistake, the teacher would put a red X on whatever you did wrong, and it was really perceived as a bad thing. Game-based learning, on the other hand, every time you make a mistake, it actually gives you some feedback on why you made that mistake and how you can fix that mistake. And so it's really taking advantage of mistakes, not wasting a good mistake, if you will. And then the last thing is, game-based learning kind of gives you a score and gives you immediate feedback. And a lot of people want to master these things, and so they'll play a few times to maximize their score. And it's through that repetition that we see actual retention and better learning outcomes. So for the foundational knowledge, our recipe, game-based learning, works really effectively. And going back to the walkthroughs and simulators, they're the next piece of the recipe, but the difference is, in our platform, when you author a walkthrough simulator for the digital adoption platform, it's kind of like a guided tour. But when it's for the training platform, it's challenge-based. So basically, it challenges you to complete transactions in online or mobile banking. And you know, each time you make a mistake, you kind of get a worse score. So people will do it multiple times again, so that they actually learn to use the tech and they can make mistakes in a risk-free environment. And I think that is a really great way of making it fun for people who have otherwise no reason to try and understand your tech. It makes it fun for them to do so. And so by doing that, we drive a more tech savvy frontline staff that improves the member experience. So the recipe for us is game-based learning for foundational knowledge, walkthroughs and simulators to drive product knowledge. But the next one is, how do we teach frontline staff to naturally and elegantly recommend the technology and support it in the real world? And so what we've done is build in role play scenarios that you can author in the tool that allow you to create lifelike scenarios where either a member comes in and wants to do a transaction, or a member has contacted you and needs help using the technology. And it's sort of a virtual role play. And you know, pre-pandemic, a lot of companies did live role plays. But the problem with those is they always feel a little hokey. Both parties know the other party's acting, and it feels a little uncomfortable. Moreover, next gen folks, with each passing generation, they prefer digital, and for a bunch of reasons, but not the least of which is being able to practice in an environment where they're not embarrassed by their mistakes. So these role play scenarios can be really effective for creating a better member experience, and also driving the sort of knowledge and confidence in your frontline staff so that they're comfortable both promoting and supporting the technology. The next piece of our recipe is a central narrative. So most learning systems are really just a repository of training content. And when you're trying to drive engagement amongst your staff with your digital stuff to create a sort of digital culture, there's sometimes a bit of resistance. As I mentioned, digital can be a little intimidating. And the central narrative part of our software really solves that. And it doesn't have to be what we've done. We've created a game around it. that is built in the image of today's most addictive mobile and social games, but it provides context for the training. So when you roll it out and you're trying to drive awareness of the program, you're not saying come learn about digital, you're saying come play, which creates a much greater level of participation and awareness amongst your staff. But it doesn't have to be a game. It could even be just a skills engine that shows people how they're progressing. There's a lot of different ways you can create a central narrative, but it's really contextualizing all the training that you're asking people to take and giving it some type of purpose. And for us, it's a central narrative game. And what it does, as I mentioned, it drives awareness and participation, but it's also kind of a little bit addictive. So people come back every day and they play multiple times. And so what that does is drive distributed practice that really makes training stick. So for us, the central narrative is a really crucial part of the recipe. So that's kind of our learning recipe for digital. I think that it addresses a lot of the key things that we need to tackle in order to drive a great member experience through our frontline. But then the other side of it is our folks in our training departments and heads of branches and operations and retail and so forth. They're the ones stuck with rolling this stuff out. So what we've done is we've built a content exchange. So if you can imagine that each of our credit union clients has their own instance of Lemonade. And then on top of all those instances is a content exchange. And that content exchange has a repository of ready-made content that you can download into your credit union's LemonadeLXP instance. And then you can edit it if you need to. And then roll it out to your frontline staff or your office staff as well. And we're making regular additions to that. So they're just little modules of training that you can sort of cherry pick and use for your needs. But we've gone a step further and we've created pre-baked curricula. This is the one we have for digital. We have a lot of clients that are using LemonadeLXP for stuff beyond digital, but its sweet spot really is digital. So we have a number of different curricula, and what it basically is a roadmap of how to use the content in the content exchange. So once you download the pieces of content, it tells you what order to put them in to create a logical curriculum that ladders employees up to the digital expert level that you need them to be. So we've really baked everything in there in our recipe to help credit unions drive fluency as quickly as possible so that our frontline's nailing that member experience. And then the last thing I'd highlight is Lemonade comes with rapid authoring tools. So you can very quickly create all of the types of content that I just talked about, role play scenarios, game-based learning, technology walkthroughs and simulators, coaching and mentoring, all sorts of different types of content you can create in there. And that's really important right now because we've got a really fast changing business environment, not just due to COVID, but in the US there's a new administration. So there's changing regulations and rules and policies. So being able to roll out content quickly is really important for keeping your frontline staff as knowledgeable as possible, which is the key to sort of nailing that member experience. And then of course, being super fast at creating content helps reduce production costs, which is always a thing, is saving costs. And then lastly, the ability to easily update your courseware. So as things change, as your digital products change, or as the policies around them change, you can very quickly change your training so that your frontline staff is completely up to speed on where you're at today with your digital.